It is Sunday, April 6th, and it's getting pretty late with Jake Landau. This week on the podcast, we have a different kind of guest for you. She is a trustee at the BC Sports Hall of Fame, and she's a host on the Broadcast podcast. It is our new guest, Sam Chang. Sam, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
It's a great pleasure to have you here. I mean, I've wanted to have you on a guest because, I mean, one, I think both have pretty similar perspectives on hockey and sports. Like, I mean, you're a much better fan than I am, but like, I also just like the crossover you have when I see you on social media between you talking about sports and politics.
Yeah, it's a pretty, I think I would say it's an interesting mix. I think people who follow me for sports kind of get surprised by the political takes, and people who follow me for the politics get surprised by the sports takes.
I can understand that because I think people who like follow my journalistic work when I write opinion pieces about, say, the war in Palestine may then get confused why 15 minutes later I'm tweeting about the Nintendo Switch 2.
Yeah, exactly.
It's admittedly not very like tonally coherent, but I just roll with it.
I think there's a certain charm to it.
Yeah. And it also is humanizing in a way that people are like, oh, they don't just talk about politics all the time. They're actually a human being with, opinions and beliefs.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, they have hobbies, like they do things.
I think being a Canucks fan might be more of an illness and less of a hobby.
I mean, I'm a Leafs fan, so it's not like we're doing pretty great for championships either.
Yeah.
The great, at least the relieving thing about being a Leafs fan is I don't go to home games in Toronto anymore. I haven't for like 10 years. Like, my rule is that I'm only going to a home game in Toronto when I see them get past the second round of a playoff game. And then I'll spend whatever money they're charging. But, like, I've seen this before. I've seen the good season and then the wet fart playoffs before. Like, I can't do it again.
Yeah, I haven't quite reached that stage. I am still self-flagellating and going to games, although significantly less often than I used to. And they've been real bad this season. So it's been an exercise in masochism this year, I think.
True. At least in a way, like when they're bad in the season, you know that. Like there isn't they're getting to the top of the division. They're getting into the playoffs. They're getting a wild card spot. Maybe they're going to do a run. I'm like, no, they're not. Like, it's the Leafs. No, they're not.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, it's just expectation management.
Yeah. And it's like, but what I do is I visit my family in Montreal, and I will go see the Leafs when they are playing the Habs in Montreal. And that way, the Habs get the money and the concession revenue and the ticket revenue.
Well, the Bell Center is just pretty unbeatable as an experience.
You can get Leicester smoke meat in the stadium. My Jewish self died and went to heaven. And the other great thing is I watch here in Toronto and in Montreal. I will go see PWHL and I'll go see the Marlies and the Rocket at AHL. So it's and I really do think that I mean, obviously, I won't say that PWHL is underrated at this point. I think it's getting pretty popular in Canada. But AHL, minor league, when it's not the top tier of a pyramid, I do think that's a bit underappreciated.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I am desperate for a PWHL team here, so I'm very jealous. Really hoping that one of the two new expansion teams is going to be Vancouver. And yeah, I'm with you. I enjoy hockey at all levels. I don't think I don't think you're missing out by skipping NHL games for even CHL games or AHL games.
Oh yeah, it's it's not even just hockey for me. If it's two teams playing a sport that I like and they're competitive enough, I can enjoy it. Back when I was working on the 2021 federal election, I got my one night off of the campaign. Me and my friend, whose wedding I ended up being at a couple of years ago, and we went to see the Barrie Baycats playing in the Intercounty Baseball League, which is it's a college woodbat league essentially in Ontario, where the college students go and play in the off season with wood bats instead of the aluminum bats. And the tickets are $10. It's essentially the same price as like minor league baseball, like the Vancouver. I know the Vancouver Canadians have gotten a bit more expensive in recent years at Nat Bailey Stadium, but like you get the idea. It's like I love sports, like
Yeah.
or not every single sport, but I like a lot of sports, and I don't need it to be at like the top of the pyramid. And when you look at like European football, where you have multi-tier pyramids, like people will go to watch their local team just because they like them. Like nobody cares that Wrexham isn't at the top of the pyramid.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I'm with you. There's just something about live sports that it's fun. It doesn't really matter what level it's at as long as it's, live and, as you said, somewhat competitive.
It's like my mom doesn't particularly like hockey much, but I when I took her to the semifinals for the PWHL where Toronto was playing Minnesota, and I think it was game two at home, so it would have been at the Coca-Cola Coliseum, and this was so the Marlies AHL stadium. And this was when they were still playing at Maple Leaf Gardens for the full season, but they expanded into the bigger stadium for the playoffs, and it was such a good success that they now have been there this whole season. But like my mom wasn't really interested much in hockey, but God, do I tell you, like at 30 seconds to the end of the game, when they finally broke like the 0-0 and like got the puck in that like and she was like screaming with the rest of the stadium. Like I do think like a lot of people who may not necessarily like sports per se or like or breathe it or we do, like there are parts where you can get them like wrapped up in the energy.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that.
Now, when it comes to PWHL expansion, like I think one of the big questions that comes to mind is what is the current diplomatic issues with the United States going to do? Because I know that the PWHL has kind of been weirdly focused on keeping parity between the Canada and the US. I know like the rumor is that I know there's the rumor about Vancouver and Seattle, and it seems to want to keep that parity. But like, I know also the Canadian teams seem to be doing better financially than the American ones.
Yeah, I think you're right. They have performed incredibly well in the Canadian markets. I think probably beyond expectation. I admittedly have not been following the U.S. teams as closely.
Yeah, the I know New York is having serious trouble with attendance. Minnesota's probably the best of the three. Boston's okay, but it does feel weird that they're getting the same sort of Gary Bettman sickness, where they're like, instead of putting a team in a place where people love hockey and will sell it out most of the time, we're going to put it in a place where we have to work hard to convince people to like hockey.
Yeah, it's definitely Gary Bettman syndrome is a good way to describe it. I I think it's particularly surprising given they kind of forfeited the branding they had. Um, wow, I'm totally blanking on the PHF team names from
Right.
before, and
Yeah,
so
it's I hate the new Toronto the Scepters. Like I remember when we were the Toronto Six, and I
yeah,
liked that. Like it was a good name. I liked the red jersey. Like it was cool. Like
it was
it,
cool, and they had these were teams that had not insignificant fan bases and loyalty and merch and branding. To me, I thought it was a bit silly to kind of give up all that existing goodwill and kind of start from scratch.
mind you, I think Montreal likes the Victoire branding a fair bit. Like
Yeah,
so, like credit to them. They got a pretty sick jersey and team name out of things. But like in Toronto, I know like there were. I don't know that most people care about it per se, but I know like there has been some vocalness about like the fact that people aren't necessarily that keen on having like monarchy symbols. Uh,
yeah, I thought that was an odd choice.
yeah. And also, like, when I was reading the branding package they put together, and they're like, Toronto is known as the Queen City. And I'm like, who the fuck? No? Like, no, I've never heard that in my life. Like, This is like it felt like something that was put together by some Madison Avenue agency in New York that had never visited Canada per se.
Yeah, that's exactly what that is.
Yeah. And just like it's not hard. Like you can afford to fly here. Like you can see the things. Like hell, if they even just made it themed after the CN Tower, like that wouldn't necessarily be the most creative, but that's a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do worry about the fact that like so many of like Canadian sports teams play in leagues with America right now because it is becoming a problem. I know there were issues at the Toronto Blue Jays with the opening of the season where Rogers didn't let someone in with a hat that said Canada is not for sale. I know there was security going around apparently telling people to stop booing the American anthem. Like it feels like this is not an ignorable problem.
No, it certainly isn't. Although I always think it's funny when they have the PA guy or security asking people not to boo, because like when has that ever
Yeah.
worked or helped? Like if anything, you're making people double down on the
And
booing.
also normally they don't even ask people not to boo.
Yeah.
Like this is a new thing. It is a bit absurd, and I do just it does make you think like what is the state of sports going to look like in Canada going forward? Because I don't know that we can take it for granted that people will be able to cross the border back and forth to play sports.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of already seeing that. There was I don't know if you've been following March Madness at all, but there was the discussion about um last night Marco Rubio canceling all the visas of South Sudanese citizens effective immediately. And Duke was in the middle of their game and their starting center is South Sudanese. Um
Did they
and
literally just take him off the court?
I believe he actually finished the game, but for about 15 minutes there, I think all the college basketball reporters were like, "Well, what happens here? Like, what's gonna like? Are they gonna just cancel the game? Are they taking him off? Like, what's like there are impacts to these things on every aspect of life, including
Right.
sports.
And to
You
my
know,
knowledge, doesn't the Western Hockey League and CHL don't they have a few American teams?
yeah, they do,
Uh,
they do. So
and those I mean we all love junior hockey in Canada, but I mean they don't necessarily have the kind of profile or protection that a major league athlete would have in this kind of situation.
yeah, I mean, I think at least in Washington, Seattle, and kind of the Tri Cities areas, they are pretty well established teams, and they're big parts of the community. But they're also like Spokane's relatively red. I it's a good question. I don't know how that kind of cross border travel for the teams is going to be impacted going forward.
Hmm. I mean, in general, I do hope it is a shame because I mean the whole idea of like playing sports across international borders is to bring people together, and like part of the reason that I like watching Toronto play Montreal in hockey like at any level is just because like for me that's what hockey means emotionally in my heart. It's like we talk about the original six or whatever, but like in the real beginning, like it was Toronto and it was Montreal, it was Anglo Canada and Francophone Canada, and that was that was the big thing. That was the event. And now, obviously, like it's good that there are more Canadian teams now, but you get, there's that emotional like narrative and appeal, like to like hockey, the fact that there can be certain tensions in society that are played out through the sports as a way to expunge that tension rather than the bad stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's to your point. That's partly why the whole keep politics out of sports thing to me has always been very silly, right? You can't really keep politics out of anything. Obviously, you
Right.
can try to ignore its impacts, but sports have always been inherently political. And not only that, but governments often use sports for sports washing. They are not separate things. And to the extent that you try to keep them that way, it's pretty artificial. And it's only because it's for people who can do that.
Right.
Uh,
because like if you're black, you can't leave that on the sideline before you go on the field. Like
Yeah.
that stays with you. That might affect how referees in a sport treat you and assign penalties, and that isn't. And it would be a lie to say that this doesn't happen.
Yeah, and you see that we saw that in very concrete terms with the Trump administration and Jackie Robinson and trying to kind of whatever remove the DEI from it. And I'm glad Jeff Passan called that out, but it's a silly exercise. It's not something you can separate
Right.
from.
And that was an interesting moment for me because I think it was a time where a lot of like the old guard guys in baseball broadcasting started to understand, oh, this is this is this is not what we you get the idea. Like
Yeah,
the mask came off and they didn't realize that some people are unfortunately dumb and do not understand dog whistles. Like they genuinely didn't understand that DEI just meant they were going to start purging the memory of people who aren't white.
yeah,
And like I don't on the one hand like it frustrates me because how can you be that dumb? How can you not have basic awareness? But also when they do like pipe up and be like, "Oh, we didn't mean it," like I don't know. I feel complicated about it.
yeah. And I mean, you see it again today with Ovechkin breaking Gretzky's record, and you can say it's cool, and it is cool, but it's hard to leave the politics of those two
Right.
individuals out of
It,
the discussion.
and like people have gotten mad at me and when I've mentioned that and but it does like I can't ignore that like Wayne Gretzky is friends with Donald Trump and goes to Mar-a-Lago all the time and was just sitting in a box with Cash Patel and I was having a
And
discussion
today,
yeah and I was having a discussion with Twitter on Twitter with Post Media columnist and like they were saying well it's not like he had a choice like he was invited by Gary Bettman and I'm like well no he did have a choice and he could have said no Gary I would like to sit somewhere else in the stadium or if that's not an option just not gone like it's not the Godfather it's not an offer he can't refuse.
yeah, and I mean, it's also a bit artificial to think that a guy who is like buddies with Trump has any issue sitting with
That
Cash
too,
Patel.
yeah. Like, and I know they've been like, well, Trudeau went and had dinner with him to calm him down, and I'm like, well, I thought that was stupid, and it didn't work. Like,
Yeah,
like I'm not a hypocrite. Like, if you want to criticize Trudeau for that, I criticized him too, and people can go read my writing about it at the time to double check. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, like you've got, and then Ovechkin, like on the other hand, I know wasn't one sports journalist essentially removed from the press pool by the Washington Capitals for asking him about his support for Putin earlier in the Ukraine war?
Yeah, I think that's happened, and I think he's been generally blacklisted as well.
Well, so it's like, why am I expected to give the benefit of the doubt to either of these people? They're
Yeah,
assholes.
yeah. And whenever people are like, well, I accept that it's different for him, his family is there, whatever. But you know what? So is Artemi Panarin's, and he's had absolutely no issue speaking out about it. So it is a choice.
Yeah.
It's just and I'm willing to accept that Panarin and Ovechkin can each have their own different assessments of risk and make different decisions, but it doesn't mean that we can't talk about those decisions.
Right. And like you can say, oh, I collaborated because I have no other choice. But there are people whose families have died refusing to collaborate in similar situations, and they will judge. Like,
Exactly.
I'm sorry, I'm having a brain blank right here. Uh,
I totally understand.
yeah. Do you think that this will affect how people perceive athletes as role models, or do you think that these criticisms are just falling on deaf ears, and that people continue to say, "Oh, this person's good at a sport, so I should admire them as an example of personal character"?
I find that a really interesting topic because I think I started off a few years ago when I got into kind of the sports media universe as one of the people who thought, you're an athlete, you're a role model. And and where I've landed is somewhat more nuanced. I think that athletes, we probably shouldn't hold up athletes, many of whom kind of finished their education mid high school at best, um, as these kinds of moral, political, thoughtful role models, and expect them to have um, kind of thoughtful answers about it. But at the same time, I also think if you are an athlete and you have this kind of platform, it is incumbent on you to notwithstanding your schooling level, you have the ability to educate yourself, talk to people, and use your platform in a responsible manner. So I think there's a needle to be threaded there. I don't know where it lands, but yeah, I would agree that in general, the simple view of athletes are role models is not quite that black and white.
Right. And I mean, like, I get what you mean in that, like, we don't want people to say, this is my role model just because they're good at throwing a ball. But at
Yeah.
the same time, when people are giving you that platform, we should put pressure for you to use it responsibly.
Yeah.
And ironically, one of the few athletes who I do consider a role model in some fashion is Charles Barkley, just because of that famous Nike ad where he's like, "I'm not a role model. Teachers are role models. Like firefighters are role models." Like, and I appreciate it. The irony is that by telling kids, "Don't grow up to be an athlete. Grow up to like do these contributing like beneficial things for society," he was being a role model.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, and I also like I remember when there was the Kyrie Irving stuff in the NBA with the Holocaust denial. Like I know, like uh, Chuck, he went on TV like on the show, and he was just like, "How can we expect people to care about us when if we won't return the favor here? It's if it's bigoted, it's wrong, no matter who it's happening to." It's like it's not a complicated thing, but it's important. Like when you he is a role model because he has used his platform for good things. He should not
Yeah.
like he was not a role model because he was good at his sport. He was a role model for acknowledging that shouldn't be why people listen to him. Yeah.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
I would totally agree with that analysis.
Yeah. And I guess on the final note, part of the discussion before we go into our break, like I know with Christine Sinclair, like I became a really big fan. I got into football, soccer, when the women's team was making their run at the Tokyo 2021 Olympics. So like I got really sucked in. Like if anything, I care more about women's football than men's football. I'm really excited for the new Northern Super League to pop up. But I got really upset when the drone scandal came out. And then it came out that essentially there had been spying at the Tokyo Olympics, where so the main gold medal we've been celebrating has, a Houston Astros-esque asterisk on it. And I remember Christine Sinclair's statement that she put out where she essentially said, "I was not aware and I was not in the room." And like I like her, she's still the first kid I have, but I can't lie and say it doesn't affect how I see her, and you get the idea there.
Yeah, it's to your point, especially when you have expectations of an athlete, partly because they have used their platform well before. I think that it's hard not to be disappointed when they don't respond with the in the way that you would have hoped they did.
Yeah, and I mean, I part of a reason I like women's sports so much, like PWHL and the new soccer league, is that as a queer guy, it's nice to know that statistically the people playing on that team are more likely to agree with the fact I should exist.
Yeah.
Like, and like it really shouldn't be like that. There shouldn't be a disparity between queer acceptance and like feminism and stuff like in women's sports and men's sports, but unfortunately there is. And like when like mind you, the PWHL isn't perfect. They have not addressed the issue of trans inclusion in the sport appropriately. And I know there's that one player from Minnesota who's made some openly bigoted statements, and it's made people upset, myself included. But like, you get the idea where like when there's games during Pride Month, or not Pride Month, that's in June, but you get the idea. They'll have like Pride Appreciation Nights, and they'll just put on the Jumbotron. They'll be like, shout if you're a lesbian. Like, it's a completely different experience from being at an NHL game in a positive way. Like, it makes people feel included in the sport, and it's going to make more people grow up enjoying the sport.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I agree. I think the PWHL could be doing a better job of, in respect of its queer and trans inclusiveness policies. They certainly could be handling the Brita Curl situation much better. But yeah, I mean, I've been to at least 2 Canucks games this season where they're still doing a kiss cam, and I complain about it every single time. I've got to be dozens and dozens of kiss cams. I've never once seen a queer couple on there. They have a incredible propensity to show people who are like fathers and daughters.
Yeah,
mothers
they'll
and
show
friends.
relatives more than they'll show queer people.
Yeah, but they've somehow never shown a queer couple, and to me, if you're not going to do that, if you're just going to keep the kiss cam to be super heteronormative and frankly very uncomfortable for a lot of people, just get rid of it. Like it's a waste of time.
I want to give credit to the Blue Jays because there is no kiss cam at any Toronto Blue Jays game, and also for how you can put like a happy birthday or happy anniversary message. Unlike other stadiums, they will not allow you to do a proposal through it because very simply, they don't want to deal with someone feeling pressured and uncomfortable. You get the idea. They don't want to do that.
That's really smart.
Like they don't want to put a woman in a situation where she feels like she has to say yes because 50,000 fucking people are all looking at her. So I'm not giving credit to Rogers every day of my life, but credit where credit is due. Yeah. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back after the break. Today's episode of It's Getting Pretty Late with Jake Landau is brought to you by me. You see, folks, while all of my written articles and podcasts are available without a paywall, I need money to make them. Also, I need money to live. So, if you enjoy my content or find it informative, please consider an optional paid subscription at jakelandau.ca/subscribe. Thank you, and enjoy the show. And we are back from the break with our guest Sam Chang and our 3 headline topics for the week. Our first headline topic of the day is about parties, both liberal and conservative, in the Canadian federal election, and how they have been dropping many, many candidates. And after 2 p.m. tomorrow, on Monday, April 7th, it will be too late to nominate a new one. It's been notable. I mean, obviously, you always have a few dropping off, but I know there was the Paul Chang situation where last week I talked about it with my previous guest, Jeremy Appel, and then he stepped down, I think, pretty much at midnight after I published the podcast episode. So this is mostly seems to be new conservatives being dropped, and I think we're at a 4 or 5 now.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm hoping for 6.
Yeah, I believe you'd be referring to Aaron Gunn.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's exactly who I'm referring to.
For those unfamiliar, please share more with us about this inauspicious individual.
Aaron Gunn has been a long-time conservative figure, for lack of a better word. I think at pretty much every level of politics in BC. He was involved with ABC's municipal campaign a couple of years ago. Definitely involved at the provincial level with John Rostad's Conservatives, and now is running in the federal election as a Conservative candidate. I have blocked the riding from my head. I think it's Cowichan. But he is, pretty vocally and for a long time I would say far right, very, very MAGA type conservative, um, transphobic for sure, has, I think, incredibly regressive views on drugs and homelessness, has made, I think the discussions around his conservative candidacy right now, at least, are around comments he made that were pro Putin some years ago, and frankly, a lot of residential school denialism. So kind of spans the typical checklist of far right talking points.
And it feels like the two main hallmarks of being like a far right conservative in Canada now are transphobia, and then the second pillar is you just said it. I apologize. It would be the residential school denialism. It would be the denial of the residential school and day school genocides, where children were forcibly stripped from their parents. They were forced to stop speaking their native languages. They were beaten. They were sexually abused. They were starved, and they were murdered. And under the Genocide Convention and the Rome Statute, it qualifies for genocide in several different aspects, and I really do have zero patience for people who deny it at this point. The same way I have no patience for Holocaust denial.
Absolutely, and he's I think trying for a swing to sort of right of center rather than far right, because he's now released several statements kind of saying, oh, I said the things about Putin when I was younger, and I definitely don't agree with any of the residential school denialism. Like that, those were things I said a long time ago. And then you go back through his social media, somebody actually did, and some of the comments about the residential school denialism is from 2023. It's like really not that long ago.
I'm not the same man I was 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's pretty transparent, and it's not, to, not that they're in any way analogous, but I thought it wasn't even close to Mark Carney's statement about disagreeing with his father. I thought it was a pretty weak denial from Aaron Gunn, and I think that's probably because A, he doesn't really believe it, and B, it's, you can see what he's written. It's all out there. He hasn't been shy about it.
And I do like that you bring up Mark Carney's father, because I agree it's not comparable. One is horrible things you've said, and another thing is horrible things your father has said and done. Like I don't believe in that you pass sin along your genealogical line. I think that's kind of horrifying as an ideology. But like what I liked that Carney did was that he was just like, yes, of course I love my father. He's my father, but he's said some horrible things, and I do not agree with them. And I understand, because I don't think most Canadians like would expect him or want him to like renounce like his own disown his family, but like he did what I expected and what you can reasonably expect, which is to say my father doesn't need to be defended. This was bad things.
Yeah, and I thought he did it in a better way than I expected. And I thought it was well handled.
I agree. I think the one thing I am still want pressure on, though, is the researchers didn't just bring this up for the sake of slinging things in an election. Part of it was that they've been trying to get records on the school that his father was a principal of, the Indigenous Day School, where there was Indigenous Day School students, but also residential school students who do their classes there during the day. And the government has records for that school, but they have not released those records to researchers, which is obviously important for survivors and their families. So it isn't just that I'm happy that Carney agrees that what his father did is wrong. If this is the case, then he certainly has no excuse to not push for these records to be released with his power as prime minister.
Absolutely. I think to the extent that the federal governments have talked about their commitment to reconciliation, and undergoing the process, it really doesn't align with the delays in providing this information.
Right. And it does remind me of the Yaroslav Hunka scandal thing too, where there's also the list that Libraries and Archives Canada won't release from the Duchesne Commission report. And I know the irony with that is that a rough draft got leaked a few weeks ago to the media because a few university academics literally found the draft and it got accidentally released in another Freedom of Information request without the government even realizing.
Wow. So
Yeah,
you're not up to date on that one. So that's the first I'm hearing of it.
yeah, that's real Mickey Mouse operation they got going on.
Wow.
Moving on to our next topic. Recently, Rachel Gilmore was hired by CTV's Your Morning Show to do a weekly fact-checking segment. But before she could do a single fact-checking segment after her introduction, she was released by CBC from CTV for my apologies from this role because CTV got complaints from the Conservative Party, including spokesperson for Pierre Poilievre, Sebastian Skamsky, and because a single political party complained about a journalist covering them in a way they didn't like, CTV said that they were going to drop Rachel Gilmore. Now, Rachel Gilmore is an independent journalist. She does a lot of freelance work and a lot of her own coverage. And shortly after this, I know Canada's National Observer picked her up for a similar fact-checking role throughout the federal election campaign. But it's as a journalist, as an opinion journalist, as a photojournalist, and as someone who occasionally does actual reporting, this is not good.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was appalling. I thought the excuse that they didn't have the bandwidth to deal with essentially right-wing trolls complaining about her was really, truly pathetic.
And I feel like it's underplaying it to just say right-wing trolls. It literally is like a senior Pierre Poilievre conservative campaign staffer said, "We don't like her, you need to fire her." And then CTV did it. And this is after they already did it to Christina Tenaglia months ago.
Yeah, and sorry, I should clarify. What I mean is what they told her was they didn't have the bandwidth
Yes.
to deal with complaints, when in fact what it was political pressure.
Right. Yeah.
And I think it's especially appalling when you consider the fact that Poilievre doesn't have media on his flights. He's not accessible to them in the way the other party leaders are.
I know there was one instance at a press event where a member of the press was physically shoved by a member. And what frustrates me is that the media allow themselves to be treated this way. Not just allow it, but that in a way the business interests behind, say, Bell and Rogers and Chorus and all and such, they are not willing to stand up for their reporters and their journalists because there is a thumb on the scale. And I'm tired of being asked to pretend like there's not a thumb on the scale here.
Yeah, and just to finish off that thought, you're seeing reports from the CBC reporters who are on Poilievre's campaign trail saying, he's limiting journalists to 4 questions. In a lot of cases, the staffers are holding the mics up to the reporters and kind of yanking them away if it's not a question they want to be asked. They're trying to get reporters to tell them in advance what the questions are. And the CBC reporters have been given no questions. And to your point, there is a thumb on the scale. I think it's a bit ridiculous to pretend like we don't know who owns most of the media in the country.
You'll have Ed Rogers going down to Mar-a-Lago with his family and posting the photos they took with Donald Trump. But we're supposed to pretend that things like what happens at the Blue Jays game with the anthem are a coincidence.
Yeah, and I mean, you're telling me they can't manage complaints about Rachel Gilmore, but I mean, admittedly, I've muted Brian Lilly for ages, so I don't actually see his headlines, but I would otherwise be forced to read whatever drivel he's putting out online.
Yeah, I haven't blocked Brian Lilly just for the singular purpose that members of the Queen's Park Press Gallery, so the Legislative Assembly of Ontario's press gallery, have a requirement according to their constitution that they cannot have direct partisan ties. But Brian Lilly's wife is the director of media relations, like the press secretary for Doug Ford.
Yeah.
And that on the one hand, I don't want to like go after people for what their spouses do, but income during marriage is communal property, at least in Ontario. So like he is directly financially benefiting from regular payments from the Conservative government.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sorry, you can't convince me that some of the things he says and writes are deeply held beliefs and not things that are just self-interested.
And what frustrates me is I was told by the president of the Queen's Park Press Gallery, Colin DeMello, that I wasn't eligible to join because I have direct partisan ties. And I'm like, well, fair is fair. If that's against the rules, that's against the rules. So why does it seem to only be against the rules to have liberal partisan ties in the Queen's Park Press Gallery and not the conservative ties?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, I am fine with equality in that regard. Either both in or both out, but fair has to be fair here. And I am firmly of the belief that if a political party is sending money to you or your spouse, you have a direct partisan tie.
Yeah. I could not agree more.
But I guess moving back on to the main topic here, though, is like this is scary if you're a journalist, because like we try to stand by our principles in our coverage. Like when I call opinion journalism because and my views changed on that over time, but I think a lot of people don't realize like there's still a fact burden when you write opinion. Like it's biased, it's to persuade, but the things you write have to be true. Like unless I mean different publications have different standards, but like I just wrote a piece for Haaretz this week in Israel, and like it was very strict like fact burden where I had to provide sourcing for pretty much every other sentence. So I resent the idea that journalists are now going to be made to be afraid to publish facts because we're worried we'll lose employment, we'll lose job opportunities or jobs we already have because we've published true facts.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And I think part of the issue is from my perspective, at least, I'm not sure that some of the right wing, I don't like calling them news sources, but for lack of a better word, news sources hold themselves to those same kinds of journalistic standards for opinion pieces. I think a lot of the opinion pieces coming out of those papers that I see they're not opinion pieces, they're fiction.
Right. And I get what you mean. Like there are certainly like different standards from institution to institution. And the reason I brought up the example of Haaretz in Israel is because they just have a higher fact burden standard for proving and citing yourself in opinion pieces than any Canadian publication I've published in so far that I wasn't me self-publishing. But I mean, I also know that when I self-publish, I have my editorial standards. I try to keep my work fairly transparent, and I know that my readers can judge that on their merits. But like, I also know that I don't necessarily have it as bad as people like Rachel may do, or friends of mine like Saba Etizaz or Erica Ifil, like, because like I'm a dude, like, and it shouldn't be that women are more vulnerable to this kind of persecution in their career, but they are. Like and it sucks.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some of the regular harassment Rachel deals with over the last few years, and I think it's there's a broader conversation to be had as well about how how women and other marginalized individuals in these spaces are treated.
Yeah, and it's like I've talked to, and they're like, "Well, Jake, I'm a guy and I get harassed online too." And I've tried to explain to them. I mean, I've gotten sexual harassment and physical threats like emailed to me and DM'd to me before, but the difference between men and women in this regard receiving them is that I will receive them a few times a week, and women will receive them multiple times per day. Like
Yeah.
it's just the scale is different, and the scale matters. Like one is something you can laugh at and then go close it. Another is an unending torrential flood.
Yeah, and I would say on a smaller scale, when we launched the broadcast a few years ago, um, we were kind of the first all women sports podcast in that space. And we were, myself and my co-hosts are all relatively outspoken on Twitter. And I would say the degree of harassment um, that that we received was something I had never experienced before. And you're right. It's not like a sporadic thing. It is like in every hour of every day on every platform. They find your email. They sign you up for like fake Pornhub accounts. It's like it's deranged.
Right. I I I occasionally like I'm maybe a bit closer to understanding it than other guys just because of my writing on Palestine. I have actually been put on blacklists, and
Yeah.
now there are a couple countries I can no longer safely visit. But if the vast majority of men, I just do not think can understand that kind of experience of knowing that someone is like monitoring everything you say online, trying to suss out where do you live, where do you go to work, like where can I intercept them. Like it's terrifying.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
I guess for the no prize question of the week, for do you think that there is a future for journalism if this is what journalists have to experience on a day-to-day basis?
Oh man, that's a really depressing question. I think it's really hard to ask people to live their lives that way. Um, I think even in kind of the last 10, 15 years, I would say the quality of journalism that we see and the type of work we see is not the same as what we used to get. Like I used to be a huge journalism and news junkie. I still am to some degree, but it's frankly not the same. And it's not, there are obviously great journalists and with great integrity who still do a really good job, but like frankly, it's really difficult in the current environment, and with the consolidation of media and the ownership of media for good independent journalism to happen.
Yeah, well, that is the unfortunately correct answer, and I have now awarded you the no prize for stating the unfortunately obvious truth. But yeah, it is. How can we expect people to be journalists? And this is what being a journalist is like. Like, it would be one thing if you got treated this way and you at least got paid well.
Yeah.
like, like I mean, like I know how to code. Like I could be doing better than this.
Yeah, it feels like a pretty thankless job, even though it's something that I think society at large should be thankful for.
Indeed. Moving on to our final topic of discussion for the day, and as you folks know, every week for our third of the topics, we like to cover a local story from across the country. And today, we are talking about last night's by-election for Vancouver City Council. Sam, Vancouver's interesting because I believe it's only one of two major cities in the country to have municipal political parties.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's the there's I know there's ABC as you've talked about Ken Sims' political party. He's currently mayor, and I know he has a majority on city council right now. I believe there's 11 city councilors in Vancouver, and he has seven of them.
Yeah.
And in this by-election, there was an upset in that we had two victories by people who were not part of the ABC, the right-wing party's majority. There was Sean Orr of COPE, which is the Democratic Socialist Party, and then there was Lucy Maloney of One City, which is the Social Democratic Party. And if people at home are confused, what's the difference between democratic socialism and social democrats? The answer is One City didn't want to be part of COPE anymore, so now there are two parties. Sam, what do you think this means for Vancouver?
I have to say, Jake, it was, I think, a unexpected and very pleasant victory given the current political circumstances otherwise, when everything else feels like it's moving right. I would say Vancouver generally, I think people consider as a progressive city, and so it was a bit shocking when ABC kind of dominated the last municipal election as the right-wing party, backed by a ton of developers, and frankly running a lot of cops in politics. They were the first party in Vancouver municipal history to receive an endorsement from the Vancouver Police Union, which I think caused a lot of outrage and frankly shouldn't have happened. And then they doubled down in this by-election by running the then head of the police union who endorsed them. And that's of course Ralph Kaisers, who was also involved in the cover-up of the Miles Gray murder. And so I think, and in the lead up to the election, there were a lot of comments from Ken Sim about how no one turns out for these elections. Probably as many people are going to show up for the by-election as there are in this room at an ABC event. The two candidates for ABC didn't show up to any of the community hosted debates. And
which seems to be common for conservatives now. They don't show up to the debates because they don't think that they have anything to win, just things to lose.
Yeah, and that's what you would expect from political candidates who aren't interested in what their constituents want. I think you saw a direct contrast in that in the campaigns that Sean Orr and Lucy Maloney ran. It was a very grassroots campaign. It was very aggressive. There was a lot of door knocking, a lot of events, a lot of community events. They showed up at a lot of different community debates. And it generated, I think, the highest turnout in Vancouver municipal by-elections in a long time. They had about 20,000 more votes than they did in the last by-election in 2017. And Sean won more than 50% of the votes. He won, I think, almost 35,000 votes. Lucy was close behind. And Sean ran as an openly socialist pro-Palestinian candidate.
Yeah, I think that's understated. Like, folks, I wasn't joking when I said COPE. Their full name is the Coalition of Progressive Electors. They are explicitly a democratic socialist party, which is interesting because even like I know One City is more of like that center-left NDP vibe. COPE seems like an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, COPE is, I think, about as left as you could get in municipal politics here. And Sean ran a phenomenal campaign. He didn't shy away from difficult topics. I think even when he received pressure to walk some of those back, he didn't. He stuck to his principles. He knew what he was advocating for. He's been a long time affordable housing advocate here. He's deeply involved in the community. And I think having that foundation gave him a lot of credibility. People have seen what Sean has stood for a number of years. And I think seeing that he held fast to that, even in the face of political pressure while he was running, motivated a lot of people to go vote for him in very difficult circumstances. We found out yesterday that the lineups for the by-elections were 3+ hours at some polling stations because the city had cut election workers by about, I think, somewhere between 60 to 80% from the last by-election. they had cut the number of polling stations, and so it was actually quite difficult for people to vote, and people were happy to wait in line to vote for him.
Uh, I know there won't be much of a change in the actual dynamic on city council in terms of passing bills or bylaws, because I know the two vacancies were left by one candidate who left one city to go run for the NDPs and MLA. And then the other was Adrian Carr, who had retired in January. She was a Green, so she was opposition to ABC, but she retired in protest of ABC.
Yeah.
So she was like, if ABC, I don't get that. Like, I would understand being a member of ABC and retiring because you don't like the leadership. I don't understand being in opposition and then saying, to really show my political opponents, I'm going to give up political power.
Yeah, I can't particularly.
And then the Greens lost the seat. Like,
Yeah.
one city keeps one seat, which good for them. But Cope managed to return to city council and steal that away from the Greens through pretty much an unforced error.
Yeah, I can't explain that decision.
Okay, so it's not just me not seeing something. This is actually confusing to everyone else.
Yeah, yeah. But I will say, I think it does change the dynamic of council. They, in addition to those two seats, ABC kicked out Rebecca Bly from their caucus, who now sits as an independent. And one of the major complaints about Ken Sim is that he doesn't show up to any of the council meetings because they know ABC is going to pass everything. And I think with the numbers as they sit now, there are a lot of jokes about how he might actually have to show up and do his job rather than just going to Bitcoin conferences in El Salvador. Yeah, so I think it won't change the outcome of a lot of bills, but Sean and Lucy will make ABC's life much more difficult.
Well, it will be interesting to watch. I know that Vancouver, they don't just have a city council, they also have the parks council and they have the school board, and those are also filled by the same political parties.
Yes.
Yeah. So, do you how that seems like an interesting? I know it's not part of the main story here, but how does having like an actual brand on the ballot beside the person's name, how does it change how you vote in Vancouver?
What's interesting is because I never had to vote differently, I've never really thought about it. I think in a lot of ways it reflects probably the elections at different levels. Like, what the party platform is rather than just the individual. I guess in some ways the downside is that you end up having slates rather than just candidates, which is what happened in the last election. Was ABC ran a full slate and won pretty much the whole thing. But yeah, I've never actually given that very much thought.
True, because I know in Montreal is the other big city in Canada where it happens. And I know what happens and is interesting there is the same way that the Bloc exists federally as a regional Quebec-only party, there are regional parties in Montreal, or at least one. Like, I believe there's one that just represents Laval. Like, it's a very weird dynamic. Like, I know I forget her first name, but the candidate who ran for the Liberals in the by-election that the Bloc won in Montreal, Palestini. Like, I know she came, I believe, from that political party in Montreal. So, like, it's very interesting, like, the weird kinds of dynamics that can pop up when it's not just based on name recognition. I know that in Toronto we have a big problem with incumbency bias, where just it's very hard to unseat, like, even a hated and unpopular incumbent in Toronto just because nobody else has name recognition.
Yeah, it's kind of like the devil you know versus the devil you don't.
Well, that is interesting, and we will be keeping an eye on developments in Vancouver, and hopefully progressives will keep on pushing over there. Sam, thank you so much for joining the program today. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having me.
No worries. Sam Chang, everybody. And thank you once again to Sam Chang for joining the program to discuss her experience and perspective as a trustee at the BC Sports Hall of Fame and as a host of the Broadscast podcast. It has been a pleasure, and we will see you all again next week for 3 more headline topics and another perspective from another voice. See you folks soon. Cheers. This is the end of the show. Bye.